Hello, I'm Sam Fenwick and welcome to Business Daily from the BBC. How do you make $1 million before you turn 30? In our new series, we're speaking to 6 people from all over the world who've hit that milestone. Today we hear from Iseult Ward.
At the end of last year, we reached an amazing milestone of 140 million meals equivalent distributed since we started. But what was more impressive for us was that 50% of those meals happened in the last 2 years. And so at a time with extraordinary disruption, to have actually seen so much food being redistributed through our solutions here in Ireland, but also by our partners using our technology internationally as well, is something, that we're incredibly proud of.
Iseult makes more than 1 million meals every month from food that would otherwise have ended up in the bin. We'll hear how she built her social enterprise FoodCloud, starting out dealing with small market traders and now working with huge multinational companies. I started by asking Iseult what set her off on this path.
Over 30% of food is lost or wasted across the global food system, but this actually results in 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So on the one hand, you've got this huge environmental problem being created by this food that's being lost or wasted. And then on the other hand, you've got around 800 million people around the world who don't have enough access to food. So it raises serious moral questions when you consider that there is enough food out there. It's just not getting to the people who really need it. And that was really what set us off on our journey to create a solution to basically connect businesses that had this surplus or excess food with local good causes, charities, community organisations, the people that are working really hard every day to help those who really need it in our communities.
And very early on, didn't you? You saw that there was a need in Ireland and that there were people there who wanted to fill that gap.
Yeah, it was around 2012 when we started. So the impact of the financial crisis was still being felt on the ground. And there's often a lag effect with these things where when people find themselves in challenging circumstances, they'll rely on savings, families, friends, goodwill. But when that runs out, people find themselves in situations where they do actually rely on community organisations and charities. So being able to collect free food from local supermarkets in their community so that they could help these people just seemed like a no-brainer at the time.
And the first project was linking up a charity that helped homeless people with an artisan food market.
Yeah, so we needed to test the idea to see if it would work. So before we had a technology solution, before we had any sort of warehousing and logistics, we literally connected a local farmers market to a nearby charity. And on a Wednesday when the market closed, they were able to go by and collect the food. And I had the amazing opportunity then to actually see the food arriving at the charity, seeing the people in the organisation going through the box of food. And, there was amazing food. There was wild garlic, raw milk, organic sourdough, artisan sausages. So not only were we providing additional food, which was obviously going to help from a financial point of view for the organisation in terms of saving, they were also getting access to food that was interesting that they may have never seen before. So all of a sudden conversations are sparking because people are standing around these boxes of strange food and, there's nothing like a shared meal to bring people together. And I think that was one of the impacts we saw very early on that we may not have anticipated, that actually more than just providing an additional resource to charities to help them save money, you're actually providing them with a tool that, breaks down barriers, starts conversations and can create amazing social connections.
So it was the social impact that really got you going on this, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you see even the relationship between the farmers market and the charity, was incredibly powerful because on one side you've got a farmers market, people who really care about the food that they're selling and have produced it themselves. The last thing they want to do is see that food go to waste. So for them to have the opportunity to share that food with a local cause was incredibly powerful for them too.
So what was the tech then that you came up with to link charities with supermarkets or people that have got good quality surplus food?
Yeah, so we saw an opportunity when we did that initial connection with the farmers market and the local charity. We realized if we wanted this to happen hundreds, if not thousands of times, we would never be able to manage it through text messages and phone calls. So we needed a solution that would streamline the process, that would connect the charities and the businesses to each other, help them communicate, notify each other when there is food available, when there's a collection about to happen, but also to track the impact, and to make sure that we were all able to see, where the food is going. So we designed a technology solution that would basically make it as easy as possible for a business to donate food and as easy as possible for a charity to then accept that food, collect it and put it to good use.
And in those early days, did it turn out to be as easy as possible?
There was definitely a lot of trial and error. There's no doubt. Definitely a lot of evenings where myself and my co-founder were driving around at 10 o'clock collecting food and trying to find charities to drop it off to. And we didn't always get the supply and demand correct. But, now years and years of trial and error, I think we've a very good solution now where we have thousands of charities that are connected to thousands of local businesses. But definitely in those early days when you've got 5 businesses and 10 businesses, you're constantly trying new things and constantly trying to make it better and really make it work.
Now, we should say at this point that you were doing all of this at the same time as studying for your final exams at university, which seems like a very, very big ask.
Yeah, it was definitely a challenging time. I think having started FoodCloud in the university, I was very determined that I would get to continue with it after university. And before my exams started, we actually launched a trial with the technology and it didn't go very well. But I had to step away from it for a few weeks and it was a very difficult thing to do. But as soon as my exams had finished, I was able to get straight back into it. And we had learned so much from what hadn't worked that actually being armed with a failed pilot and armed with the knowledge that, I could now work on it full time after my exams for a few months. That was really when we started to kind of hit the ground running.
So what was the thing that failed with that initial app development and what did you learn from that?
When we first had the kind of prototype for the technology, we assumed that, any food that was free, that was available in the local community would be very easy for a charity to go and collect. But in reality, community organisations and charities are some of the most resource-constrained organisations in society. So one of the first donations that happened, the charity had travelled across Dublin city centre, had collected food, had brought it back. But what they'd collected was about 10 portions of soup and 10 sandwiches, which they were very grateful for. But they feed 100 people a day and it took them an hour to collect it. So we realised from that actually that we needed a consistent supply of food that charities already were used to purchasing almost day to day. And that was actually what led us to targeting the retail sector, because we recognised that the type of food that was available in a supermarket at the end of the day was more closely related to the food the charity was already buying. So then,
staples like milk, bread, eggs.
Exactly, rather than say soup that was already prepared, which is much harder to integrate into like a daily lunch run.
Now, you did meet some resistance, didn't you? There was a particular catering manager who reduced you to tears because they said that this was never going to work.
Yeah, there was. I had a great opportunity to meet the head of catering for a national organisation, which you can imagine I was incredibly excited about. But unfortunately, they didn't see this being viable and that they didn't see it working. So yeah, that'll always hit you quite hard, especially at that early stage where you do question every day, is this really going to work?
But you didn't let it crush your ambition, did you?
That was an outlier, to be totally honest. And I think if I wasn't able to recognise the fact that it was an outlier, that would have made it harder. We met tens of charities around that time, as many as we could physically visit. And whilst not everyone thought this is definitely going to work, actually most people didn't. They did believe in the idea, in the vision, in our passion to make it work. And many at the time had said, you know what, we don't know if this will work, but we can see the potential benefit for us and we're willing to back you and do our best to make it work. So they're the people that you focus on in those situations. You do have to listen to the other feedback. It was incredibly valuable to hear from her why she didn't think it was going to work.
Why didn't she think it was going to work then?
A lot of actually was to do with food safety, and the kind of the processes that were involved, and especially because this was something that hadn't been done before. And obviously, particularly for community organisations, they serve vulnerable people. They need to make sure that the food they're serving people is of a very good quality and a high standard, and there isn't any risk. So, when you're telling somebody that you're redistributing something that could have gone to waste, there's a lot of kind of education and barriers to break down to really get somebody to understand that this is perfectly good food that any of us could have literally bought 10 seconds before it was donated.
And what about the people who were using the food banks and the charities, the people that you were helping? What were they telling you?
We actually work with an incredibly wide range of organisations because food can add value to so many different services. So on one side, we might be supporting a youth club. Another might be a community centre where there's kind of like a drop-in service where people can have a meal together on a daily basis, kind of supporting people that might be a bit isolated in communities. You might have centres for people dealing with drug addiction, domestic violence. Food can play such an essential role that actually the variation of people that get to benefit from the food is huge, and they're from all parts of society.
So at what point did it really take off for you?
The first time that I became confident that, we were on the right track was when Tesco agreed to sign up.
And Tesco's a very large supermarket in the UK and Ireland.
Yeah, huge. So, the fact that they were willing to trial with us meant that everybody was willing to take us more seriously. And that was huge. That really changed all of the conversations we were having, whether it was with potential supporters, other food companies or charities. We then did a lot of work with Tesco to roll out the solution to all of their stores in Ireland. And in that process, it was Dave Lewis, their former CEO, was visiting Ireland. And he said that he wanted to see this in all of their UK stores.
So here you are, you've just graduated from university. You're sat in a room with the CEO of one of the largest supermarkets in Europe. And he's just given you this big contract and he said, right, go and do it. You've got, more than 3,000 stores to deal with and get their waste from them, get all their waste food. What are you thinking at that point? Are you thinking, oh my goodness, what have I got myself into? Or are you thinking, yeah, let's go for it?
I'd say both of those things in rotation every 5 minutes. It was a very exciting, but also terrifying time.
Did you ever feel tricky being a young female CEO of this new social enterprise?
Yeah, I think, there's always challenges, but there's also opportunities that come with that as well. And I think on a personal level, you kind of have to, you focus on both and recognize that there are two sides of it. Of course, there are times where it can be overwhelming. I've definitely experienced imposter syndrome and all of those things over the last number of years. But on the other hand, being young and female has probably given me opportunities that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise as well. So I think for my own sanity, it's good to focus on the fact that there is a balance there, and that there's opportunities and challenges in different ways.
What do you mean by imposter syndrome?
I suppose in moments of doubt, that's what that really is. You can question yourself and whether you are the person to be here, whether there should be someone else, and really doubting your own ability. And I know it's something that from my own friends, female friends, that often women experience a lot more. And I think it can become a challenge. But I've been very lucky in that, I have a brilliant female co-founder and I have a brilliant team, board, supporters. And really, they're the people then, if you are questioning yourself, that will help build your confidence. But also, there's a saying by the philosopher Michel de Montaigne, and there are many terrible things in my life, but most of them never happened. And I think that is something that, when you are in a negative place, whether it's about your own ability or whether it's about, your business or how things are going, like we do have a lot of fears in our minds that, don't actually come true. So it's important to try and keep yourself in a positive place because that's when you're at your best.
I mean, if we look at where FoodCloud is now, I mean, you've had a phenomenal year. How do you grow your business further?
So in Ireland, we've got our 3 warehouses and our technology solution that distributed over 3,200 tonnes last year. And then internationally, our technology platform is used by Fairshare across the UK, and also in partnership with Tesco and the national food banks in the Czech Republic and Slovakia as well. So we're seeing constant growth in terms of new partnerships with food banks and new businesses coming on board, especially in the last 2 years with supply chain disruptions because of COVID, with the increased need in our communities. At the end of last year, we reached an amazing milestone of 140 million meals equivalent distributed since we started. But what was more impressive for us was that 50% of those meals happened in the last 2 years. And so at a time with extraordinary disruption to our operations, but also that of our food business partners, the charity partners, to have actually seen so much food being redistributed through our solutions here in Ireland, but also by our partners using our technology internationally as well, is something, that we're incredibly proud of. But we also recognise that the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, we need to halve food waste per capita. We need to achieve zero hunger. So whilst we're incredibly proud of the last 2 years and how much we've grown, we have a lot more work to do if we're going to help achieve those goals by 2030.
We hear quotes from politicians from around the world saying that no one should have to use a food bank. I mean, do you think we'll ever get to a point where that will actually happen?
I'd hope to live in a world where people weren't reliant on food banks. But I do think food in communities will always have a very special role because it does have a brilliant way, every culture celebrates with food. And it is a brilliant way to connect people and bring people together, especially in our increasingly diverse society. It's a brilliant way to celebrate difference. But I do hope that people continue to meet together in communities and share food and celebrate food.
FoodCloud entrepreneur Iseult Ward bringing this episode of A Million by 30 on Business Daily to a close. I'm Sam Fenwick, and this programme was produced by Helen Thomas. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm on Twitter @BBC Fenwick. And for more, please download our Business Daily podcasts.